Tonight, immigration protests flood the streets of Los Angeles as President Trump calls in the National Guard. Protesters clash with police over the president's immigration crackdown. Governor Gavin Newsom is now suing the Trump administration for launching the Guard, saying President Trump is fanning the flames. Tonight, our conversation with a California lawmaker as Matt Gutman reports from L.A. Another impact of the immigration crackdown, staffing nurses across the country in the midst of a dire shortage.
These are folks who are trying to come here the right way. That this is literally the definition of the American dream.
A federal judge issues a bombshell decision dismissing actor Justin Baldoni's $400 million defamation lawsuit against co-star Blake Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds. Lively still accuses Baldoni of sexual harassment during the filming of It Ends With Us. Russia launches the most drones and missiles at Ukraine since the start of the war. The egg recall that's impacting nearly a dozen states. Remembering funk rock pioneer Sly Stone and the musical legacy he leaves behind.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We begin with the growing tensions in Los Angeles. For the first time since 1965, the National Guard is on the streets of a U.S. city without a governor's approval. This is in response to those immigration protests. Tonight, hundreds of National Guard troops are lining Southern California streets, and ABC News has learned hundreds of active duty Marines will be joining them in the next 24 hours. Governor Gavin Newsom is taking the fight to the courts, filing a lawsuit against the president and the Department of Defense today. As the protests against the Trump administration's immigration policies and arrests continue to grow, we're still seeing mostly peaceful demonstrations today. But there was a far different scene over the weekend when protesters set off fireworks and crowds shut down the 101 freeway downtown. We'll talk with a California lawmaker about the protests and President Trump's turn to military force. But first, let's get right to our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, in Los Angeles.
Tonight, 700 Marines are on their way to the streets of Los Angeles to assist the National Guard and law enforcement tamp down violent clashes with protesters angry over the Trump administration's immigration policies and arrests. Over the past 72 hours, pockets of LA descending into chaos. Protesters setting cars on fire, dumping bikes and scooters on police cruisers on the highway. Law enforcement firing hundreds of flashbangs and non-lethal projectiles and making dozens of arrests. It got so heated in the streets that a British photographer needed emergency surgery after being struck by a non-lethal projectile.
Moving them on through the...
And there was this moment. Watch as a correspondent for 9 News Australia
You just shut the
reporting on the protest when an officer hits her with a rubber pellet. And tonight, an escalating war of words between California Governor Gavin Newsom and Donald Trump. Newsom suing the president for creating the conditions for this chaos when he sidestepped California officials to deploy thousands of National Guard troops.
Are you going to deploy Marines in California?
We hope to have the support of Gavin because Gavin's the big beneficiary as we straighten out his problems. I mean, his state is a mess.
Newsom then slammed by Trump and border czar Tom Homan for his response to the unrest. Homan initially suggesting the governor should be arrested, something Trump seemed to support just hours ago.
I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great. Gavin likes the publicity, but I think it would be a great thing. He's done a terrible job.
Newsom responding again, calling that an unmistakable step toward authoritarianism. I asked Homan about that.
If Gavin Newsom crosses whatever threshold it is and violates the law, do you have the authority to arrest him or Mayor Karen Bass?
If he broke the laws like any other U.S. citizen, we'll ask the Attorney General to investigate, and they'll prosecute. Tom Homan's not going to prosecute.
Spontaneous clashes began Friday as federal agents conducted multiple operations in and around Los Angeles. By Saturday, protests, mostly peaceful, grew larger when agents were seen staging in nearby Paramount, California. And by Sunday, a convoy of heavily armed and camouflaged troops arrived. We watched as the clashes intensified as the day progressed.
Just moments ago, there's some projectiles being thrown. Just moments ago, a motorcycle seemed to try to break through the police skirmish line. And now you can hear all those flashbangs going off. Police are trying to push those protesters back, firing those less than lethals at very close range. And you can see those projectiles being thrown over. Now that motorcyclist being hauled in here, looks like he's being arrested.
LAPD's chief overnight saying they may need more help.
We are overwhelmed as far as the number of people out there engaged in this type of activity and the type of things that they're doing.
And thousands today gathering peacefully, calling for the release of a prominent union leader arrested Friday during one of those workplace raids.
A lot of us are American citizens, so then what are we working for? What is the American dream? It doesn't even exist when you're picking people out of the street.
Let's get right to Matt Gutman, who joins us now live from outside the federal office building in Los Angeles. Matt, give us a sense of the latest there.
Several hundred protesters, Lindsay, have sort of commandeered, taken over this part of the street. It is blocked on either way, and I'm going to have our cameraman, Greg, pull out. You might be able to see a new line of LAPD cruisers pulling in right here. You can see lights and sirens. There are probably about 100 officers already on that side of the street in full riot gear at this point. These protesters have been peaceful, but we have seen how quickly that can turn in recent days. And there are people from all walks of life. I spoke to a former Paramount Productions senior vice president who was out here. There are writers, there are activists, there are people who've been out here before in these protests. But right now it remains peaceful. And just beyond the group, you can see that there are federal agents and California National Guard out here. Now, earlier I spoke to Tom Homan about the deployment of troops here. He says they need more troops, and as we now know, about 700 Marines are being deployed to Los Angeles. And a short time ago, Governor Gavin Newsom tweeted about that, saying that the deployment of active duty Marines to an American city, especially Los Angeles or any other, is un-American. Lindsay.
Not only, also unprecedented. All right, Matt Gutman for us. Thanks so much. For more on the situation in Los Angeles, let's get right to Representative Linda Sanchez. She represents the Whittier area where some of the protests are taking place. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Just give us an update on what the situation is like there right now.
Sure. Well, we heard that early this morning, ICE began staging at one of the city halls, and then they later went and conducted raids on a Home Depot where day laborers frequent. And folks are upset, and we're beginning to gather for protest near the site where the raid was held. People are very upset of the lack of due process that these immigrants are experiencing, and the constitutional violations of due process that they should be afforded. And so far, everything that we have indicates that whatever protests are happening have been very peaceful protests, and that there has been no violence and no property damage.
With today's lawsuit, the state now appears to be headed into a legal showdown with the president. Do you believe that the president overstepped his authority?
Absolutely. The president called up the National Guard over the objection of our governor. The National Guard can only be called in two specific instances. One is if we are being invaded by a foreign entity, and the other is if there is an insurrection against the United States government. Neither is the case here. So it's very performative what the president is doing. I think he is trying to provoke. He is sowing chaos and fear to try to bully people and to try to flex his authoritarian muscles.
You've been looking into the cases of the people ICE has taken into custody there. What have you found so far?
Yeah, we are trying to get information regarding who were the people that were picked up, to find out what their status is, because we find in many instances with these indiscriminate raids, they don't just pick up undocumented immigrants. Sometimes they pick up legal U.S. citizens, people who were born here, or people who are lawful green card holders. So we still don't have any information because, again, ICE rolls in. They don't follow the law. They don't give these immigrants due process. They don't allow them to call their family members. They don't allow them to call an immigration attorney. So it's really difficult to just get basic information about who is in custody. And members of Congress have been visiting detention centers, trying to gain access, which by law we are allowed to do. And we have been denied over and over again entry into the facilities where they are holding the people that they round up.
Border Czar Tom Homan says agents are simply enforcing immigration laws. Your response to that?
They are not following the law when they are, quote unquote, enforcing immigration law. They are violating the law and they are violating the Constitution. So it's particularly ironic that Trump calls the undocumented immigrants criminals when, in fact, ICE officers who are not following the law are basically kidnapping people off the streets and disappearing them. Every United States citizen should be just outraged at this lack of due process and lack of warrants, lack of judicial process. I mean, it's unlike anything I've seen in the United States.
What's your message tonight to the protesters?
We want the protests to remain peaceful. Obviously, Trump is looking for a showdown. He's trying to provoke. And if they engage in acts of violence or property damage, that is going to be all that he needs in order to declare martial law.
As you know, there are those in the Trump administration who say that the protests are not peaceful and have been violent. Your response to that?
There has been some property damage. Nobody has been killed. Nobody has been injured other than the protesters. We have reports that ICE are firing tear gas and flashbang grenades into crowds with little or no provocation. So they are absolutely trying to bait protesters into, counterattacks. And, I am asking everybody, we have sent out messages on social media. We have talked to our local electeds to please keep the protests peaceful. Anybody who is caught committing acts of violence or property damage should be prosecuted. But we don't see major unrest or insurrection.
Representative Linda Sanchez, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Appreciate the interest. Thank you.
As tensions escalate over immigration enforcement, President Trump's new travel ban is now in effect. The new proclamation, which Trump signed last week, bans travel to the United States by citizens of 12 countries, including Afghanistan, the Republic of Congo, Haiti, and Iran. According to official guidance, the new ban does not revoke visas previously issued to people from the countries on that list. Health Secretary RFK Jr. announced today he's removing all 17 members of the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee. The committee makes recommendations on the safety, efficacy, and clinical need of vaccines, including vaccine schedules. Kennedy said replacing the members is a step toward restoring public trust in vaccines. He has not yet named the replacements. Former CDC Director Dr. Mandy Cohen told ABC News she was, quote, deeply concerned for families given Secretary Kennedy's decision. An investigation is now underway after a small plane carrying 6 people crashed into the ocean near Point Loma in San Diego. All passengers on board are feared dead. Here's our Trevor Hall.
Tonight, 6 people are feared dead after a small plane crashed into the ocean Sunday near San Diego minutes after takeoff. Air traffic control audio seems to indicate the twin-engine Cessna struggled to maintain altitude almost immediately, and the pilot didn't know what was wrong.
4 Bravo Alpha, what seems to be the issue?
Just struggling right now to present maintain steady.
The plane headed to Phoenix, dropping off radar.
4 Bravo Alpha, radar contact lost 6 southwest of San Diego Airport.
The Coast Guard says they found debris from the wreckage offshore, and preliminary data from the FAA shows every person on board died. It happened the same day this skydiving plane crashed southeast of Nashville, Tennessee. Our Faith Abube in Tullahoma.
And that plane crashing here just 1,000 feet short of the runway, a violent impact, but incredibly, everyone survived.
21 people were on board, first responders treating many of them at the scene, 6 people taken to the hospital. Tonight, the owner of the skydiving company says we are incredibly grateful for the quick actions of our pilot, whose response likely prevented a far more serious outcome.
Our thanks to Trevor Hall. More than 50 million people are on alert for severe storms from Texas to Florida to New York tonight. This after a very active 24 hours. A tornado seriously damaged our ABC station in Abilene, Texas. The garage caved in. The roof of the studio was torn off. What could come next and where is it headed? Our chief meteorologist Ginger Z is tracking it all for us. Hi, Ginger.
Hey, Lindsay, busy is an understatement. Since Friday, there were more than 750 severe storm reports, and we are adding them up as we go here tonight. We've got watches in place from Parkersburg, West Virginia, right through Pittsburgh and Erie, say Flint and Saginaw, Michigan, up to Gaylord and Alpena. Now, those aren't the only pockets of severe storms. There are actually several others across the nation, and those flood watches on the map, we'll get to those later. But let's go ahead and talk about who else has to look out tonight. Eastern New Mexico is seeing some severe storms. There's a line that's moving pretty slowly north and west of Mobile. That's going to charge through the southeast tonight after the sun sets. Watch for that in parts of Georgia, South Carolina. And then as we see this kind of end in the overnight hours, it's just going to be rain and heavy at times from Philadelphia right up through New York City along I-95 for tomorrow morning and getting around in that commute. That'll be a wet one. And then for Boston, it really starts in the afternoon or after the noon hour and then drenches everybody through the Cape there. Now, this is the East Coast side, but a very different picture if you go west. And we're talking about extreme heat warnings for Las Vegas and heat advisories from Northern California right up into Oregon and Washington State, Northern Idaho too. Some of the numbers will break daily records. You know, over the weekend we saw it in Seattle, they were 90. Look at Las Vegas, close to 110. Spokane will be 92 before cooling down into the 80s again by Thursday. Lindsay?
Record highs possible there. All right, Ginger, our thanks to you. Federal authorities are taking the lead in the urgent manhunt for a father accused in the horrific murders of his 3 young daughters. Authorities say he was trained in the military and dangerous. He was allowed visitation with his daughters, but not overnight. Tonight, we're learning what the autopsy on the girls reveals. ABC's Kana Whitworth has the latest.
Tonight, federal authorities taking over a massive search for Travis Decker, the father accused of killing his 3 young daughters in Washington state, scouring hundreds of square miles near the Canadian border.
My message is still the same. Travis, if you're out there seeing us, we'd like you to turn yourself in.
The governor mobilizing National Guard to search the famed Pacific Crest Trail. The 32-year-old former Army soldier seen here in recent doorbell footage is accused of killing his daughters during a daytime custody visit. The court had revoked permission for overnight stays. The bodies of 5-year-old Olivia, 8-year-old Evelyn, and 9-year-old Peyton found near a campsite a week ago. An autopsy revealing the cause of death was suffocation. A lawyer for the girl's mother says Decker was showing signs of PTSD.
I think that towards the end of the girls' lives, the last week or so, that just really spiraled. He felt really alone.
The community is struggling to make sense of it all.
How do you tell a 10-year-old who shouldn't be exposed to this reality that a father can do something like this?
Our thanks to Kana for that. Russia launched its largest attack since the start of the war, firing nearly 500 drones and missiles into Ukraine. President Zelensky, in an interview, said that the 20,000 U.S. anti-drone missiles promised to Ukraine have now been diverted to the Middle East. Here's our Chief Global Affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz.
Tonight, we have witnessed yet another brutal assault from Russia. Russia launching nearly 500 drones and missiles, the largest number of weapons fired during the entire 3-year war, sending residents into bomb shelters. Video circulating online showing a Russian cruise missile streaking over western Ukraine. At least a dozen people injured in these attacks, 1 killed.
There have already been 90,000 Ukrainians killed in this war, many of them from Dubno, where we are now. And this was a target of the massive attack last night.
This woman told us she lost her nephew last year, and last night she heard missiles overhead, terrified she would lose more loved ones. We are afraid, she says. Tonight, Ukraine's president in an exclusive interview telling me 20,000 anti-drone missiles promised by the Biden administration have instead now been sent to the Middle East by the Trump administration.
It was not expensive, but it's special technology. So we counted on these 20,000 missiles. My Minister of Defense told me that the United States moved it to the Middle East.
ABC News asked for a response from the Department of Defense. They declined to comment.
Our thanks to Martha. Israeli forces boarded and diverted an aid boat carrying Swedish activist Greta Thunberg today. In a video, Thunberg said she'd been kidnapped.
If you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters.
The Ship had been approaching the coast of the Gaza Strip in order to break an Israeli blockade on aid in order to deliver humanitarian supplies to the territory. In a statement, the Israeli Foreign Ministry dismissed the efforts as a, quote, media provocation. The sea blockade predates the current conflict between Israel and Hamas that has been in place since Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip back in June of 2007. Back here in the U.S. today, a major court victory for actress Blake Lively. A federal judge threw out actor Justin Baldoni's $400 million defamation suit against her after she accused him of sexual harassment. Here's our Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, a big victory for actress Blake Lively, who's been locked in a bitter legal battle with her It Ends With Us co-star and director Justin Baldoni. A federal judge today dismissed Baldoni's $400 million countersuit accusing Lively and her husband, the actor Ryan Reynolds, of defamation and extortion. The judge said Baldoni's case was invalid because Lively's initial claims of sexual harassment were legally protected, writing, even if they turn out to be unneeded, an employee can insist on protections at workplace for sexual harassment without being accused of extortion. It all started when Lively filed a complaint alleging Baldoni sexually harassed her and orchestrated a smear campaign after she complained about conditions on the set of the film.
Can we do a score? Can we do a score? A couple scores?
Within weeks, Baldoni countersued, his attorney releasing raw footage from the set of It Ends With Us.
I'm probably getting a spray tan on you.
It smells good.
Lively's lawyers are calling the dismissal of Baldoni's suit a complete vindication. Lively posting online, "I'm more resolved than ever to continue to stand for every woman's right to have a voice in protecting themselves." Tonight, the judge is also dismissing Baldoni's $250 million lawsuit against the New York Times over its reporting on Lively's allegations.
Aaron Katursky joins us now from Lower Manhattan. And Aaron, I want to turn to another case that you've been watching closely, the retrial of Harvey Weinstein. There are signs that the jury is struggling during these deliberations. What can you tell us?
Yeah, today, Lindsay, the foreman of the jury sent a note saying he wanted to tell the judge about a situation that isn't very good. The judge called the juror in. He said that some of the jurors were attacking one another and bringing up Harvey Weinstein's past. The judge called the whole jury together, reminded them to be cordial and only to discuss the evidence. So they'll be back for a fourth day of deliberations tomorrow. This is the retrial of Harvey Weinstein after his original conviction here in Manhattan was thrown out on appeal. There are 3 women who have accused him of sex crimes, and the jury seems to be struggling to reach a unanimous verdict. Lindsay?
Sure seems that way. Aaron Katursky for us. Thank you, Aaron. Let's bring in ABC News contributor Bernarda Violona. So, Bernarda, so many cases to discuss. Let's just try and cover them all really quickly. Let's start with Weinstein. You think this is headed toward a mistrial?
I think this is going to end up in a mistrial because it's so early on that they're already talking about that they're deadlocked, that they're not able to deliberate. But more why I think it's going to be a mistrial because there's infighting with the jurors. And because there's infighting amongst the jurors, some pettiness, it's going to be hard for them to actually sit down and be able to communicate with each other and hear each other out and their point of views. And if you can't hear each other's point of views, then it'll be very difficult for you to discuss the evidence with a clear mind. So I think this is going to end up in a mistrial.
All right, let's go to Baldoni, the judge deciding to throw out his suit. Was that the right call?
I think it was the right call because when we're talking about defamation, where we're talking about the First Amendment, remember defamation begins where the First Amendment, it begins where the First Amendment ends. And now because the case was thrown out, the defamation claim with prejudice, it means that that part of the case can't come back.
So how does Baldoni's team then react? Is there any course of action they can take?
So Baldoni's team is able to appeal, but it's highly unlikely that they will succeed on appeal. When it comes to these cases, it's highly unlikely that they succeed on appeal, and they have to think about whether they're going to be willing to pay the attorney expenses that can come up in the millions if they were to lose on appeal, and it's highly likely that they will.
All right, for the third trial of the day, let's go now to Diddy. Lightning round here. So Jane, his ex-girlfriend, took the stand again today. A lot to really unpack, but what do you think struck the jury most?
Powerful moments today is hearing the voice of Sean Combs. So even though Sean Combs does not have to testify and he doesn't say whether he's going to testify, that courtroom, that jury got to hear Sean Combs' words, not just through text messages, but his own audio recordings in terms of voice notes that he left for Jane in terms of 2 recordings where Sean Combs recorded 2 conversations between him and Jane, and that was played out for the jury. But also another recording. Remember that infamous Instagram post where Sean Combs apologized for his actions. So the jury got to hear that as well. There was a lot to unpack today because aside from those recordings, you also got to find out that Sean Combs not just paying Jane's rent, but is also paying her attorney's fees.
Very interesting stuff there. Okay, cross-examination tomorrow. What do you think the defense will go after her on for that?
Well, I think the defense is going to go after this issue of consent, whether she consented in engaging in these acts. This is something that she agreed to. In fact, there were two of those entertainers that she was the one who actually got to participate in these hotel nights. But I think also they set themselves up in the sense of, in one of the recordings, they got her to agree in the sense of, this is something kinky that we got into, but she tried to say that, look, that's not how I took it. But I think in one thing that that they were able to get the defense, and it didn't really play out doing direct examination, it was in the sense of, it seems that there was a FaceTime conversation between Jane and Sean Combs, where Sean Combs asked her, what will it take for you to get rid of this resentment that you have against me? And then Jane responded by sending a text message of talking about $100,000 for this, another amount for this, another amount for that. And then Sean Combs responds in text like, wait, you're a con artist. You're trying to get money from me. Clearly, he set her up for that, and I think that's what we're going to see a huge amount of cross-examining on. It may not be tomorrow, it may be on Wednesday, but that sure is coming to putting her out as a big money grab here.
And we do expect tomorrow that the judge is going to take a look at the defense's claim for a mistrial.
For the mistrial. Yeah. Likely it'll be denied.
Yeah. All right. Bernarda, thank you so much. As always, you got it going on all the cases, all the latest there. We're up to date. Thank you so much. Coming up, a furry fugitive is taken into custody. What happened when police tracked down someone's missing pet zebra? Several states have turned to immigration to help with a dire nursing shortage in the U.S. In tonight's Prime Focus, what the Trump administration's immigration crackdown could mean for one state's ability to provide care.
We're really looking at a 2 to 3 year process right now. So that's a little bit frustrating, disheartening to some of those team members. I think it's amazing to me that so many of them have stuck with us.
Welcome back, everyone. The United States is facing a critical issue, a nursing shortage. According to experts, the shortage is only expected to intensify as baby boomers age. Many states have turned to immigration to help lessen the impact, but as the White House's immigration crackdown intensifies, will we continue to be a nation that attracts much-needed nurses? In tonight's Prime Focus, our Christian Cordero heads to Michigan, one of the states projected to have the largest nursing shortage by 2035.
For registered nurse Jarek Tabudlo, the journey to the operating room is long and not one he takes for granted.
I think the thrill of quote-unquote saving lives through surgery is kind of satisfying when you're closing the skin already. Patient was safe, patient was alive.
He works for Detroit's Henry Ford Hospital, an 877-bed Level 1 trauma center, the flagship of Michigan's expansive Henry Ford Health. Like many hospitals nationwide, Henry Ford is hiring.
This went down about 155.
The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services expects a nationwide nursing shortage will intensify over the next decade, projecting Washington, Georgia, California, Oregon, and Michigan will have the largest deficits. Chief Nursing Officer Eric Wallace says Henry Ford is down about 1,100 nurses.
This is not new for the nursing workforce, but definitely something that I think we're more focused on now coming out of the pandemic, because we saw a lot of nurses who were able to step out of the workforce, retire, move on. So we've got lots of things that we're working on to try to figure out how do we start to fill that gap.
One of those things is recruiting internationally.
One of those things is recruiting internationally.
In addition to the hundreds of hospital workers who cross the Detroit River every day from Canada, Henry Ford also hires from the Philippines. Why the Philippines?
The Philippines is a great place for a number of reasons. One is, and probably first and foremost, is they train their nurses very similarly to the way that we do here.
It's a relationship that goes back generations, with Filipinos today making up 1% of the U.S. population and 4% of the nation's nursing workforce.
How was your night?
For nurses like Felice Abad, the opportunity was in the profession itself. She was a nurse in the Philippines when she had a patient with abdominal bleeding. The fix was textbook, but one her rural hospital could not provide.
We couldn't do anything. There's no capability for surgery. So they had to talk to the husband and say that this is it. And I couldn't describe what I felt.
Helpless.
Yeah, helpless.
She was part of Henry Ford's first push to recruit Filipino nurses. Jarek arrived during the hospital's most recent efforts.
I was interviewed February of 2022. I was issued a visa, an immigrant visa.
In March?
In March 2023.
It has been decades since the U.S. passed major immigration reform. Today, delays in processing work visas and narrow limitations on the number of visas allowed means of the 400 nurses currently in Henry Ford's pipeline, only 25 have arrived.
We're really looking at a 2 to 3 year process right now. So that's a little bit frustrating, disheartening to some of those team members. I think it's amazing to me that so many of them have stuck with us.
He projects another 36 recruited nurses will join the health system by the end of the year, and adds if everyone they've hired in the Philippines were here and working, their shortage would be cut by more than a third.
If there's not enough personnel available to take care, the quality care will not be there.
Henry Ford is part of a larger group trying to address this issue through legislation that would funnel 25,000 of the necessary employment-based visas to nurses. The bill has been introduced and reintroduced several times since the pandemic.
And despite bipartisan support, we haven't seen one of those be passed into law.
The latest effort, introduced by Democratic Senator Dick Durbin in 2023.
We have medical professionals who want to come to the United States. We have shortages of medical professionals in hospitals and clinics all over the country. It's in our best interest, in the nation's best interest, and in the best interest of the individuals to give them that chance.
And co-sponsored by 10 Republicans, including Senator Tom Tillis. The bill did not make it out of committee and has not been reintroduced since.
People need to wake up to merit-based immigration, to guest worker programs, because it's one of the single greatest benefits to our economy when we get people back to work.
Those against expanding the work visa program often say the healthcare industry should instead focus on improving the recruitment and retention of U.S.-born nurses. Foreign-born workers are undeniably woven into the labor force overall. A recent report found immigrants make up, on average, at least 10% of all workers in every major industry. In healthcare, it's roughly 17%.
We've got to expand the pipeline if we really want to solve the problem.
In the spirit of your perseverance, this administration hasn't been shy on their crackdown on immigration. Is there any reason to believe that this problem, the shortage itself, will get worse before it gets any better?
I tend to be hopeful, right? I think that if we're continuing to do the right things then and continuing to partner with our colleagues in other healthcare systems, that there are solutions that are out there.
Other regions have become more competitive in attracting foreign-born nurses, including the United Kingdom and the Middle East, which each have a more streamlined immigration process. What do you tell someone who perhaps you're recruiting right now and they say, I'm a little nervous to go and be a green card holder or just have legal protected status without being a U.S. citizen? Can I even come back to the Philippines to visit my family and then re-enter the U.S.?
I think what we tell them right now is that we've seen no indication that for folks who are coming here as part of this program that there's going to be any change in their process or their status.
Demand for employment-based immigrant visas in the U.S. is expected to continue, far outpacing the supply. Jarek says he's a resource for people back home considering the journey.
We are providing information about what's the process, how it is living here, what are the pros and cons, weather.
Is that a pro or a con?
Winter is not a pro, it's a con. I'm not used to winter, especially in Michigan.
Yes. He hopes to stay in the U.S. long term. as does Felice, who raised her son here and learned about their new home alongside him.
Having a child growing up asking me about the history of America, I have no idea. I have to help research, and now I get to know, oh wow, so this is America.
Where she found an opportunity to improve lives, including her own. What do you need the lawmakers to know?
These are folks who are trying to come here the right way, that this is literally the definition of the American dream.
Our thanks to Christian for that. Coming up, the details on that massive egg recall. Nearly 2 million eggs are being pulled from the shelves due to the risk of salmonella. We'll tell you about the states and brands affected. But first, Americans across the country are increasingly buying older homes instead of newer ones. We'll tell you why when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. 15 and 30-year mortgage rates have been pretty steady for the last 7 months. The 30-year staying right around 6.8%. Economists do not expect a downward trend anytime soon. So what have the relatively high rates done to the housing market? We'll tell you in tonight's By the Numbers. For starters, a slowdown in the construction of new homes means we're buying older ones. The median U.S. home purchase last year was 36 years old, according to Redfin. It was just 27 years old in 2012. Last year, only 17% of homes sold were less than 5 years old. High interest rates have kept construction at bay and buyers too. The U.S. housing market had nearly 34% more sellers than buyers as of April. In fact, April sales were the slowest they've been since 2009 when the U.S. economy was in recession. Slow sales usually mean falling prices, and in fact, 1 in 5 home listings had their price reduced last month, according to Realtor.com. Cold comfort, really, since median home price sales have nonetheless jumped 53% in the past 6 years, outpacing any wage growth. So what can you do? Rent. A recent study by Bankrate found that renting is cheaper than buying in all 50 of America's largest metro areas. And still ahead, it was Broadway's biggest night last night with the Tony Awards. We'll tell you some of the winners. And you know him from HBO's Somebody Somewhere. Now the very funny actor and comedian Jeff Hiller is out with a new memoir. He tells us all about it next. A plane crashes with skydivers on board. Nearly 2 million eggs are recalled, and a runaway zebra gets a ride home. These stories and more in tonight's rundown.
A new study published Monday in JAMA Pediatrics found that over 7,000 more children died from firearm-related injuries in the years following a 2010 Supreme Court decision that gave states greater power to set their own gun laws. Over the 12-year post-decision period, researchers estimate more than 6,000 excess deaths occurred in states with the most permissive gun laws. Meanwhile, 4 states, California, New York, Maryland, and Rhode Island, all of which had strict laws, saw significant drops in pediatric gun deaths. More than 1.7 million eggs are being recalled due to potential contamination with salmonella, a type of bacteria that can cause foodborne illness and, in rare cases, even death. August Egg Company is voluntarily recalling brown, cage-free, and brown organic eggs that were distributed between February 3rd and May 15th, 2025, across 9 states. The recalled eggs have a sell-by date between March 4th and June 4th, 2025, and were sold at grocery stores in California and Nevada. The CDC is advising consumers to discard or return any affected eggs. In a carefully planned overnight heist, thieves cut through a safe and stole more than $1.3 million worth of jewelry from a store outside Chicago, the store owner said. The burglars reportedly worked for nearly 5 hours during the night, disabling internet service to the entire office complex where the store is located before breaking into the store. Police said the incident is under investigation. Ballerina Misty Copeland announced her retirement from the American Ballet Theater. Copeland joined the company as a teenager and quickly became a star, gaining mainstream appeal. The company said they are planning a farewell show in October featuring Copeland and other dancers. It was Broadway's biggest night in the Big Apple. Wicked star Cynthia Erivo hosted the 78th annual Tony Awards in New York City, where the original cast of Hamilton reunited for a medley of hits from the musical. The robot love story, Maybe Happy Ending, took home 6 Tony Awards, including one for Best Musical, while Nicole Scherzinger won for Best Performance by an Actress in a Leading Role in a Musical for her turn in the Broadway revival of Sunset Boulevard. A pet zebra that was on the loose was captured and airlifted away by local authorities. Ed the zebra became an internet sensation after residents spotted the elusive zebra roaming the area. In Tennessee, it is legal to own a zebra as a pet without requiring any permits. The Rutherford County Sheriff's Office in Tennessee confirmed the zebra was captured in a pasture near a subdivision and brought to a trailer.
Actor and comedian Jeff Hiller is known for his spunky humor, charm, and of course his role as the sweet best friend Joel that everyone wishes they had in HBO's Peabody-winning Somebody Somewhere. Let's take a look.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am. Oh my God, kids, right?
I hope they hooked you up.
You know what? They actually did.
Good for them. I knew they had it in them. See, that's the children leading the way.
Still, his journey into the acting profession was non-linear, and he's now sharing the words of wisdom he's earned in an undeniably relatable way with his new memoir, Actress of a Certain Age, My 20-Year Trail to Overnight Success. Jeff Hiller, kind enough to join us in studio. How are you tonight?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Okay, so it's my understanding that you were a voracious reader and listener to actresses of a certain age, their memoirs, their life stories, right? And in fact, you name each chapter after some of their memoirs. But why choose that name, Actress of a Certain Age, for your own memoir?
Well, because, you know, it is a term thrown around at women who have committed the cardinal sin of
aging.
Exactly. Die young. And I identify with that group of people. And, you know, I didn't get my show until I was 45 years old. And so for a while there, it felt like this was not going to happen. So I'm taking that moniker and owning it.
You talk about how you really didn't get the success until 45. Prior to that, you were teaching and performing improv with Upright Citizens Brigade. What other kinds of jobs did you have prior to that?
Well, I was, I did a lot of guest star work on television shows, but that only takes one day to shoot. So I spent a lot of time temping. I was a waiter at the Olive Garden. I was a roaming actor at the Jekyll and Hyde Club haunted house themed restaurant. I've done it all, and it's not pretty.
When was what was the epiphany that you decided, I need to just go for this and do it full time?
Well, after I graduated from college, I was a social worker. I worked in a shelter for unhoused youth, people under 21, and I was really bad at it. I don't like conflict, and I told everyone I was going to get my master's in social work in New York, but I knew secretly I would defer for a year and try and become an actress. And I did it.
And look at you now.
Just 25 short years later.
And you also have, of course, some very serious stories that you talk about growing up gay in San Antonio, Texas. And you really are able to look at that trauma and really kind of turn it around into some humor. To what do you credit that?
Well, I think, speaking of trauma, I wanted to just own it, and I wanted to write about it, and it almost became a catharsis to write about it and to really sort of exorcise those demons. And also, that is my upbringing, and that is what made me who I am today. And so I can't just ignore it, and let's put it all out there. Let's be authentic and tell our true selves.
You give a lot of life advice in this book. Anyone in particular that is top of mind that you want to share, entice people to read?
Oh, well, first of all, you know, don't listen to advice from some dumb actor. But second of all, I would say the biggest advice is don't give up on yourself. Even if you are too old, too fat, too salty, you still can dream and have agency in this world.
June obviously is Pride Month. For those young people out there who are still experiencing the kind of trauma that you felt growing up decades ago, what would you want to impart to them?
I would just say that there is still a community for you and that we're all here to support you and we've got your back.
Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the show. His new memoir, Actress of a Certain Age, My 20-Year Trail to Overnight Success, hits the shelves, digital and otherwise, tomorrow, Tuesday, June 10th. Finally, tonight, we remember a musical pioneer and his unmistakable sound. World News Tonight anchor David Muir looks back at the legacy of Sly Stone.
It was 1968, Sly and the Family Stone performing their hit Everyday People on The Ed Sullivan Show. And on the keys, Sly Stone, the mastermind behind it all, grooving his way to stardom. Sly Stone was a pioneer, considered eccentric and a genius performer, assembling a lineup of men and women, black and white, singing about love and unity at a time of deep division in this country, with hits including I Want to Take You Higher, and Family Affair. Sly and the Family Stone would fuse soul, jazz, gospel, psychedelic rock to make a sound of their own in the 60s and 70s. His costumes and singular style making Stone an icon. A recent documentary about his life showed the influence for generations to come, opening doors for artists including Prince and Michael Jackson. Born Sylvester Stewart, Sly got his nickname after a classmate misspelled his name. He would be Sly forever, learning to play guitar, bass, keyboards, drums, and the harmonica, recording music with his siblings by the age of 8. Sly and the Family Stone, their songs became the soundtrack to American life. Sly Stone has died at the age of 82. When he was asked about his legacy, he simply said, music, just music. I just want to play my songs. I would do it for nothing.
A true talent. Our thanks to David for that. That is our show for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us.